Before we begin, make sure to check and see that you are subscribed to this channel. A lot of people who think that they're subscribed, they mysteriously are unsubscribed. YouTube loves to do that. So make sure and check. Also, you're able to follow me on Twitter. I've got the link in the description. Now, that said, yes, indeed, there are some powerful interests who are determined not to let this particular crisis go to waste. Far as they're concerned, there's a lot of noise being kicked up right now. They're also thinking to themselves that with so much money that's going to be floating around, why, if you're throwing out over $1 trillion, who's going to miss a few $100 billion? I told you guys about that a few days ago. Here comes corporate America. We knew they wouldn't be far behind. I guess the 2008 bailout for all those corporations wasn't enough. You had no less than former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, who was on Twitter saying that no industry, he didn't say that not one industry, he said no industry, not airlines, not hotels, not cruise ships should be bailed out. They can stay in business by borrowing at rock bottom rates using their assets as collateral. Taxpayer money should be used to bail out people, not corporations. You would think that some of the policymakers would have learned something from the 2008 bailout that should never have happened for GM and these other big corporations and the banks. All that happened was once these guys were capitalized again, they just took the money and sat on it. The bailout was supposed to be used to give them confidence so they would start lending again and get the priming the economic pump. But all that happened was they took the money, sat on it, made sure that they got their bonuses. They didn't miss a bonus. So they paid themselves a bonus out of the taxpayer coffers. And now what's happening is the Republicans are saying, let's do it again. And the Democrats are playing right along with it. As far as they're concerned, well, if the people are going to get something, corporate America ought to get something too, because they've been so helpful. Now, keep in mind, these are the same people who will tell you that I'm dealing with the GOP, but just understand when it comes to politics, both sides play the same game. But we're using this as a case study. I say that for any idiots out there, the slow coast, who think to themselves that perhaps Professor Truth is on one side or the other. But what's going on here should be nothing more than a bill that's going to put money into the pockets of all these people who have suddenly found themselves laid off, suddenly found themselves out of work in an instant due to a government action. This is not a matter of corporations this time playing games and the rest of the world paying for it, though the result is going to be the same. And the corporations have lost nothing, but that's not stopping them from standing there with their hands out. The Republicans are saying that the country should spend at least $500 million to give loans, they say. Yeah, right, loans to all sorts of industries that ought not get them. Everything from airlines to energy companies to car manufacturers. Gee, didn't the country already give GM a bailout? Well, here they are saying, well, give us some more. Energy companies, you mean the same energy companies who are making money hand over fist? They need some loans for what? And the airlines, you just heard from the former labor secretary. These guys, when the last time that we heard from the airlines, these guys were bragging about how much money they were making. Why, air travel was at an all-time high. They had reached capacity. They needed new airports. They needed more planes like the 737 MAX. Why, the airlines, they were bragging about how the airplane tickets, airfares are through the roof, and you even had the head of, I believe it was American Airlines, he was complaining, saying, why are people whining about the cost of airfares? Why, for the first time, the airfares are actually priced appropriately. That's what he said. I believe it was him. It was one of the airline heads who said that. I think it was American Airlines. That's what the airlines were saying just a few months ago. Oh, you don't like the cost of airfares? Well, we're at near max capacity as far as passengers on our planes goes, so as long as that's the case, we're not lowering prices for anything. Why should we? People are willing to pay the prices, and that's all that matters. You people should stop complaining. For the first time, you think the prices are too high. Why, for the first time ever, the airline tickets are appropriately priced, with all of the fees that go along with it. So that's what the airlines been doing. They've been making money hand over fist. And as Robert Reich pointed out, what they've been doing with all the billions that they've been making, they've been spending billions of dollars over the last 20 or so years buying back stock from the shareholders. And the reason why is when you have bought back all the stock from the shareholders, that means more money for the executives because you no longer have to split the company profits with any shareholders. That's what the airlines have been doing. So you wonder why is it that they charge for everything? They charge for luggage. They charge to choose your own seat. They charge for how many people you got on board. They just fee after fee after fee. If you try to change your itinerary, they charge you. You try to cancel it, they charge you $200. I mean, there's just tons of fees for everything. Why do they do that? Well, they do that so that these guys can just make money. This is not even a matter of costs at this point. They're just making bank at this point. That's what the airlines are doing. And yet the airlines have gone to at least one of the major parties and whispered in the ear of the other ones, go ahead and kick up a fuss, but go ahead and vote for it no matter what. Do your obligatory pretend, oh, we can't believe it, a sop to the corporations at a time like this, how sad, and you're still going to vote for it anyway. The airlines have no business getting anything. Robert Reich called it correctly. These guys been making money hand over fist. If they want anything, you got interest rates at an all-time low. They need to go ahead and get some loans. And they can use the planes, the ones that are sitting on the tarmac now because nobody's using them. They can use their planes as collateral. But of course, that's not going to be allowed to happen. Instead, what's going to occur is you're going to have the corporate crook himself, Steve Mnuchin. He's going to take that $500 million. He's going to hand it off to these other corporate crooks, and they're going to use the money in order to keep buying back what remains of any of the stock that's out there in shareholder hands. And that's going to mean more money for these corporate heads. And it's going to be in Steve Mnuchin's discretion. The same kind of garbage he was doing out there in California is going to be on steroids now. And just in case you thought, well, maybe it's going to just end with the airlines and the shipping and the cruise liners and the auto industry. Well, nah, because it's going to be extending beyond that. So what it means is they're basically going to be giving themselves a blank check. So while the American people, the vast majority of folks who the entirety of any stimulus ought to be handed to, they're the ones who are going to be getting a fraction of it, but the lion's share is going to be going to the corporations. And perhaps even to Donald Trump. Speaking of the Orange Man, on Friday, I had given a link to an article from the New York Times talking about how the administration was trying to figure out how supply chains operate and what kind of subsidies they may need to offer in regards to getting the personal protection equipment that all of these healthcare providers are going to be needing. What's slowing things up? See, it ain't just the grocery store that's slow to get product to the people who need it. I cited that article and posted it for you to see so you could understand it wasn't just your local Walmart or your grocery store or what have you, where they just couldn't seem to get product in the supply chain. It was happening all over. And also in this New York Times piece, they had what I consider to be a bombshell. They had a quote from Donald Trump's top trade advisor, Mr. Peter Navarro, and he had said that some brokers had been hoarding supplies of masks in warehouses and trying to sell them at exorbitant prices. And the New York Times even had a quote from Mr. Navarro saying, "That's a Defense Production Act action waiting to happen." Yeah, but as it turns out, it's just going to keep on waiting to happen. They're not actually going to do it. But Mr. Navarro wasn't through with his empty bluster, because next he said, if anybody thinks they're going to sit on urgently needed supplies and profiteer from this crisis, they're going to answer to the full force of the Trump administration. Well, ain't that something? And you know it's got to be legit because it's from the New York Times, the white media paper of record. So the New York Times quoted Donald Trump's top trade advisor as admitting he's telling the world that there are some brokers who have been hoarding supplies of masks in warehouses and trying to sell them at absolutely ludicrous prices. So you see, it ain't just Matthew Colvin and his dirty, rotten sibling. The couple of inbreds down there in Tennessee who were trying to hoard as much cleaning supplies and hand sanitizer as they could. You also got corporations doing it too. Well, the Trump administration's on the job, and the white media, I mean, there's no way they could sweep this one under the rug. Except that's exactly what they did, because if you look for that article now on the New York Times website, well, they seem to have redacted that portion. You're not going to find it. They've taken it out. You can go ahead and click on that link on my Twitter page that I gave you to that New York Times article about Trump resisting pressure to force companies to make coronavirus supplies. You go ahead and click on it. All of a sudden, Mr. Navarro's portion is missing now. This is gone. You're not going to find it. Now, you could go online and try to see if anybody else decided that they were going to have some sort of copy of it. You would find the only thing that I found was a link on msn.com. But the thing is, when you click on the link, it's missing there too. Now, when I was in the middle of uploading this video to my YouTube channel, I was going through the internet to try to figure out if there was any more information from Mr. Navarro that I could find. And wouldn't you know it? It turns out that the New York Times moved that little bit up from Mr. Navarro. They didn't mention that, oh, this came from another piece. And look at the time. It was done today. So here we are, about 2 days after it was originally posted. They take it and bury it in the middle of another article altogether, one that's completely unrelated, and they make sure, well, we're not going to be mentioning that this is actually related to another article altogether. They're just treating it as if, oh, here's something here. So you try to find it where it originally was, and they move it. This is what the white media is doing. So you're wondering, where's all the personal protection equipment at? Well, the Trump administration's made it clear. They're saying that we're not going to do that. We're not going to be actually using the law, not with these corporations that we're not. In the face of a pandemic, well, we're not going to be nationalizing any businesses. And after all, Donald Trump's looking and going, I'm expecting these guys to cake me off in the coming years. Mr. Navarro is pointing out that there are laws being broken, a Defense Production Act waiting to happen, but is going to keep on waiting because they're not actually going to do anything. Oh, if these guys think that they're going to be price hoarding and profiteering from a crisis, they're going to answer to the full force of the Trump administration. And what's that full force? Well, we got to be nice to business, After all, we are a democracy, and what's important here is commerce, profits before people and all that. But just as great a crime as Donald Trump and his administration's completely predictable inaction is the fact that the white media is sitting here playing musical chairs. They're sitting here playing whack-a-mole with the information. They're moving it around. They're playing three-card Monte with the information here. You got the most important confession that's been given in this entire crisis from the Trump administration, and they moved it. But I want you to understand, there it is. Now, who in the white media is going to be picking this up? This ought to be the main thing that they're all talking about, but they're not. This ought to be front page. Everybody ought to be taking this and running with it, but they're not. This ought to be front of mind in all the search engines, but it's not. This is digital censorship, because apparently too much truth got told. So that's the reason why I'm putting this out here, so you understand. This is what's going on. It ain't just your local store. It ain't just a couple of hicks out there in the sticks. This is white supremacy showing you exactly what it's always been about. Oh, I'm sure there'll be some slow coasts out there saying, well, maybe they had a minute to think about it, because after all, maybe they'd, that would be kind of extreme, That would be a little extreme, I mean, what do you expect them to do, buddy? You expect the government to just show up, kick in the door, and just take the stuff? Well, over there in Czechoslovakia, in Prague, which is the capital of Czechoslovakia, that's exactly what the Czech authorities did. In Czechoslovakia, what had happened was the government had been negotiating with some company to try to get their hands on personal protection equipment, about 600,000, almost 700,000 masks and 28,000 respirators. They had been negotiating with a private company, but before they could reach a deal, the company suddenly increased the price. And the government just said, you know what? Forget that then. We'll just go ahead and get it for free. kicked in the doors, and they used their emergency powers to raid that company's warehouse, and they seized almost 700,000 masks and 28,000 respirators, and the Czech government decided to make a donation. They donated about 100,000 face masks and respirators to Italy. See, that's what they did. That's how you know when a country is serious about an emergency. As opposed to you got people playing games and trying to use the crisis for their own benefit. You'll get more justice out of the former Soviet bloc countries than you do in the so-called land of the free, home of the depraved. And that article about the Czechoslovakian authorities seizing that medical equipment, you're going to have a hard time finding that one too. That's part of the reason why I'm posting the sources where I got this stuff from. But just understand, there is a digital purge going on. White media is trying to control what people are seeing and what people are saying about this. They're trying to control what your expectations should be. They're trying to control the digital flow of information. They don't want you to remember that just a couple of days ago, just 2 days ago, you had one of Donald Trump's top advisors telling the country, or at least telling the New York Times, that there were companies who were hoarding medical supplies and that the government was threatening a Defense Production Act. So if you think you're getting the full story from the New York Slimes or the white media, you got another thing coming. There's a whole lot of folks who are trying to use this crisis as a smokescreen. They just hope that their thievery and their skullduggery and their cutthroat behavior and their dirtbag behavior is going to just get lost in the shuffle because there's so much chaos going on right now. There's just so much noise going on right now. Now you see why the white media is beating the drum so hard, saying, when is Donald Trump going to admit that he was slow to react? They're talking about that so that you don't focus on the corporations who are robbing the public blind and who are also trying to ransom lives. That's what they're doing. They're trying to hold lives for ransom. Now what they're saying is, oh, if you're going to be cutting a check for these working class people who we've been ripping off all these years, well, you got to give us something too. You can't just have it where these working stiffs get something. Why, we got it. The corporations must get something as well. Yeah, but you guys aren't who this is for. Well, you need to write a provision in there for us. What's that old expression? Adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. Well, that's what's going on right now. You're seeing a mass expression of character being revealed. Now that there's some adversity on the scene, now that there happens to be some pressure applied, you got a whole bunch of folks showing you what they are and what they've always been. And you got the black media here to document this for you. You need to understand exactly what it is that we are up against. What is black empowerment up against? This is what white supremacy is willing to do to other white people when they see an opportunity to get even a momentary advantage. This is the reason why we can give white supremacy absolutely no quarter. We cannot give the bastards any room to breathe. We cannot let up on them. We cannot show any leniency to white supremacy because this is what white supremacy is all about. White supremacy is suicidal. It started off as a putrid idea by a couple of high and mighty white power brokers to hold on to power. They disseminated to the rest of the rank and file Caucasians that, hey, we'll make you guys a little bit higher than the serfs and peasants that you had been, but you got to be our foot soldiers on a global stage. They took the exact same structure that they had used in feudal Europe. During feudalism, this is the same structure that they had. You had the king and his castle with his guard. The guard weren't treated much better than the peasants, but they were treated somewhat better. And then what happened was by about the time the 15th century rolled around, the pressure had piled up too much, but as fate would have it, they were fortunate enough, with some help from the Africans, to find a whole new continent on the other side of the globe. And then it was a matter of just in the nick of time, we're going to go ahead and rape Africa and rape this new world, which is not new at all. Thank you, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, for that phrase. And what they did was they took the exact same structure that they had in feudal era Europe, and like any good corporation, they scaled it up. Oh, it's got to be scalable. That's one of the first things you got to ask about any sort of plan that you got, any sort of capitalist plan that you got, any sort of business plan you got. Is it scalable? Oh, it turned out white supremacy was certainly scalable. As Dick Gregory said, unless you got a few $100 million in the bank, you ain't a white man. That's how it was in Europe. You ain't no white man unless you're a king with a castle. Or you're some peasant out there in the countryside. In that case, then you're just poor trash. But a white man, he's holding something. And they just took that and exported that to the world and scaled it up. This is what is going on right now. White supremacy does not care whether or not this brings the country to a complete and thorough disaster, because as far as the men who have the real money are concerned, they have removed themselves from all this. As far as they're concerned, they're safely behind their gated communities. They've barricaded themselves behind a wall of money, or at least their bank account makes them feel more secure. And to them, they think they've escaped everything. They've transcended their borders. They've transcended their physical location. They're on another planet as they see it. So no matter what happens, they're straight. And they don't have to be too concerned about the federal government doing anything about it. You got the kleptocrat in chief, along with his partner in crime, Steve Mnuchin. So family, think about that. When Kamala Harris had a chance to put that bastard Mnuchin behind bars, she didn't do a damn thing. She passed on it. She declined. And now you see what he's doing. And he's not the only one. And by the way, if you're going to be somebody who's going to make excuses for the Democrats and say, well, they have to vote for this big sloppy kiss to these billion-dollar interests, yeah, but the Democrats could also decide that they were going to be ramrodding legislation, preparing to say, you know what, if we got to sign off on this just to get some money moving for the people who really need it, we're also going to craft legislation on how we're going to take it all back from these corporations. We're going to be crafting legislation because they don't have a problem going along with the Republicans when it comes time to cut public benefits. For some reason, they'll go ahead and wring their hands and then they'll vote for it. The 94 crime bill, they knew it was going to adversely affect black people, and both Joe Biden wrote it and Bernie the bigot voted for it. And Kamala Harris used it. Learn to understand controlled opposition is how every oppressive regime dials in a population to be oppressed for the long haul. How do you make them into partners in their own oppression? You got to get them to buy into the system, to believe that the system can actually be changed, at least on a surface level. That you can believe whoever these dissidents are over here. This is your voice. These guys are speaking for you. And well, things will change when these guys over here change it. So you better not get out of line. Don't say anything out of turn. And please don't try to take matters into your own hands. Just go ahead and listen to these guys over here. They're the ones, they're the responsible ones. And of course, you need a professional, dedicated propaganda arm to indoctrinate people with that idea. That's where the white media comes in. But of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that when you look at all this money getting kicked around, look at this, over $1 trillion on a whim to be given out. And they ain't even thinking about it. So when I come along and tell you that our share, that we're supposed to be getting paid at least $16 to $20 trillion, man, these guys are awash with money. They got it sloshing around. They're drowning in it. See, whenever black folks show up and say, hey, cut the check, all of a sudden, well, we need a study, it's not feasible. It's just not feasible, as Bernie said. You think I'm going to do something that only benefits black people? No. And those are the Democrats saying that, not the Republicans. The Republicans never even got a chance to weigh in on it. Didn't have to. The Democrats were the ones saying, you think we're going to do something that benefits black people? Actually, America deciding to level the economic field for the people who built this country. America atoning in a serious way for the greatest crime in human history, that's just not feasible. That's what the Democrats were saying, sounding like any other Republican you ever heard. But when it comes to other groups, hey, Asian American restaurants have had a dip in business. Nobody's telling them, you think we're going to do something that only benefits Asians? No. Instead, what they said is, here's the check. Well, wait a minute. It's got to be $1 trillion. Well, that's more of a 20-year thing. We can't just give you $1 trillion on a whim. Whoa, hold on. Wait a minute here. Here's some non-black folks who are being inconvenienced. Here's $1 trillion. Here's a blank check. Whatever you want. Just write in whatever number you want. So you see how that works. This is how you know that this is a dedicated, deliberate program at work. Whenever other people show up, whenever non-black folks show up and say, hey, we need some money, here they are. No questions asked, no strings attached. But as soon as black folks show up, all of a sudden, well, you need to make a case. You need to justify this. This is really off the wall. You should pull yourselves up by your bootstrap. You just want a handout. You think we're going to do something that only benefits you? That belligerence, this is psychopathic racism. This is anti-black racism. This is the foundation of white supremacy. But don't you ever let anyone tell you that the problem is the government ain't got it. They got money for whatever they want. And they can come up off it on a whim. So you are supposed to be bold with your demands. You ain't supposed to be sheepish or self-conscious about it. Or, well, maybe if I ask nicely, perhaps if it's in the national budget, of course. I know you use money for a lot of things. The airlines are sitting here after over almost 20 years of using billions of dollars, wasting it on a vanity project, buying shares of the company, trying to buy back their own stocks just so that they can give bigger bonuses to the executives. They weren't doing it so that they could buy more planes. They weren't doing it so that they could be able to lower prices for the passengers. They weren't doing it to improve the airline. They were doing it so they could continue to line their own pockets more efficiently. They spent billions of dollars doing that, stuffing their pockets with that money. General Motors got bailed out a decade ago, and here they are with their hands out all over again. Here they are for something that's supposed to be for the benefit of working people. And you got these corporations hands out saying, gimme, you owe us something. They got bailed out a decade ago. They weren't owed that, and they're damn sure not owed this, but here they are. So everybody else who doesn't even need any sort of economic leveling of the playing field, everybody else who already has wherewithal because white supremacy baked into the cake for it, reserved economic resources for them and gives it to them as a matter of course. All these other groups, they got their freaking hands out. All these other interests are saying, here's what we're supposed to have. And the government's saying, you betcha. And when the people who built this country show up, we're the ones tolerating excuses, not even. See, that's the problem. We've conditioned people to think that we will accept them just poor-mouthing us, or we'll accept them backhanding us and telling us, you don't deserve anything. Be quiet, niggers. You don't deserve anything at all. We've conditioned them to think that they can get away with that mess, and we let them get comfortable doing it. Well, now we're going to make them very uncomfortable. And we're just getting started. We're going to show them exactly how sharp black empowerment's elbows really are. We got sharp elbows, we got sharp tongues, and we got even sharper minds. We're taking a very hard-nosed approach to our power. We're taking a very hard-nosed approach to our interests. Because the main thing we need to make sure that we are armed with is the truth. When these clowns try to tell you we ain't got it, you make sure that you remind them, no, you had it during the pandemic. You had it for corporations who you had already caked off just 10 years earlier. You had it for corporations who had been lining their pockets for over a decade with billions of dollars that you allowed them to have. In the 1990s, you had the 96 Telecommunications Act that Bill Clinton signed, and part of the bargain was that in return for tax breaks and all sorts of deregulation, the communications cartels were going to give the nation a fiber optic infrastructure. Well, it's been 25 years since then. And where's the nationwide fiber optic network? Oh, that's right, they're still working on it. But in the meanwhile, they want to make sure that the communications companies want to be completely and thoroughly deregulated, and they want to be able to charge whatever they want. Well, so much for the 96 Telecommunications Act, huh? So, family, you make sure that you keep your head on a swivel. Keep your mind sharp. This stuff that's going on right now, what they're hoping for is that after the storm passes, the white media is then going to be pushing the same narrative they did after September 11th and what they did after Barack Obama got elected. Oh, a brand new day has dawned. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and forget about all that stuff you were supposed to get beforehand. Oh, you guys were on the verge of a revolution in 2008. Well, we got this hand-picked mulatto tool in the White House now, so we're a post-racial nation now. You forget about all that racism stuff. Well, after the pandemic, the country's a lot closer together, isn't it? Oh, a lot of people, we pulled together in the face of a crisis. It's amazing how great this country really is. Oh, we are bigger than Donald Trump's petty bigotry, blah, blah, blah. What they're really saying is, don't be talking about no doggone tangibles. Oh, this is not about tangibles anymore. We've moved on from that. Ain't that the bait and switch they always do? Whenever we show up, well, you know what? Now's not the right time to be talking about reparations, We got to get Donald Trump out of the White House. This isn't the time for reparations. This isn't the time for that discussion. And we just go, okay. And then as soon as we help them win another election and be able to get some more money to give to everyone else but us, then it becomes, well, re-election. We got to get ready for the re-election. That's what's important. So this is the wrong time for that because we got to get ready for re-election. After all, we can't do anything without holding on to power. So you guys just wait 4 more years and we'll see what we can do. And black folks just go, okay. And then they get reelected and it's, well, we got to make sure we hold on to the White House, that we hold on to the House or the Senate. And we don't want to jeopardize that. So we can't have any reparations talk because it's just not the right time. And it's just not the right time. And black folks go, okay. What we're saying now is forget about that. Oh, they're going to try to pull it's a pandemic going on. Lives are at stake. Lives being lost. Yeah, because nobody's been killing black folks. How many black people die every single day because of lack of health care? You want to talk about how many people are going to be dying in the United States over the next few weeks or next couple of months? You got at least tens of thousands of black people who have been dying every single year as a result of being denied medical care. Either because you got doctors who deliberately give you inadequate medical care, or they just deny you medical care altogether and claim, oh, you're just trying to make some sort of medical claim because you think you're going to get unemployment or disability, or, ain't nothing wrong with you. You know these niggers, they're always trying something. You have that documents who have been documenting the disparity between how black patients are treated and everyone else. So whatever the world's going to be going on, no matter how many people lose their lives, and I'm not saying that there's anything right about that, it's just a matter of, for black folks, don't be letting anyone tell you that this is somehow extraordinary. It's been happening to us for the longest time, and guess what? They ain't been treating it as a national emergency. I want you to go ahead and keep a tally of how many people die from the coronavirus. And then you count how many black folks have been dying every year due to lack of medical care. Oh, these were lives that did not have to be lost, something they never say about black people, no matter how many of us die as a result of deliberate anti-black medical negligence. Racially based medical deprivation. And nobody calls that a national emergency. Nobody says that black people ought to be compensated for that. There's going to have to be money for that. Look at the time lost from work because of medical racism, because of anti-black racial apartheid in the medical system. Oh, look at Ralph Northam. He's a doctor, and look at how racist he is. And look at that punk doctor. I gave you a link to that chump on my Twitter feed the other day. He's supposed to be Dr. Mike, whatever the hell he calls himself. He's like some sort of spokesmodel pretending that he's some sort of medical expert when he ain't got the sense that God gave a dog. But that's what's actually happening here. Please don't let them take your eye off the ball. After the white media gets through making all of this noise about this, when they get through banging the drum, and when they finally decide, okay, we've snuck enough money out of the nation's coffers and given it and distributed even more of it to the 1%. When they get through with that, you make sure you come right out the doggone gate. Soon as we open up these doors and it's time to go back to work, first thing that black empowerment is going to say is cut the check. Well, there was like $1 trillion just, this is the wrong time for that. For God, oh my God, we just got through spending over $1 trillion. There's been a couple of stimuluses, Yeah, there's about to be one more for us. It's time out for letting everybody tell us what they ain't got, giving us the poor me routine. And no, it is never the wrong time to talk about our tangibles. That's what they've done to black folks. They've conditioned us that it's never the right time to be talking about what we're supposed to have, especially when it comes to money. There's never the right time. It never seems to be the right time for that discussion. Meanwhile, you got Asian Americans who aren't even suffering yet. Their businesses by the way, it's not the responsibility of the federal government to bail them out. Robert Reich should have included those Asian American businesses in there. If these guys really need a bailout, they need to be going to the banks for that. They don't need to be going to the federal government. Robert Reich should have put that in there. That's the way this kind of stuff works. But you see, for everybody else, there's a pandemic going on. People are dying by the thousands. Oh, but here's a check for these other groups. Black folks, we've been making our demands in peacetime, wartime, boring time, anytime, and all they say is it ain't the right time. It's not the right time. This is not the time or the place for that. Yeah, it's never the right time or place when it comes time for our tangibles. But everybody else, hey man, the bodies can be hitting the floor daily. That ain't going to stop the check from being cut for them. So we're going to condition the bastards. You know what? It's always the right time to talk about the tangibles for the black folks who built this country. It's always the right time. We are going to force this down their throats. This is not going to be a matter of choice. We ain't going to be asking politely. This is going to be imposed upon them, and we're the ones who are going to be doing the imposing. Say it loud and proud and in their faces. I want you to get comfortable bullying white supremacy. Get in their freaking faces and make sure that you are nose to nose with the scumbags when you say it. Cut the check. Well, Jesus, there's been we don't even know if coronavirus is gone for good. That's okay. We're here to stay. Coronavirus may be gone, but we're here to stay. We ain't going nowhere. Cut the check. It does not matter what it is that the white media is attempting to make front of mind. When it comes to black empowerment, our tangibles are always the headline. Our tangibles always lead the news. Everything else is below the fold, or it's buried on page 6 as far as we're concerned. No matter how much noise the white media makes, you don't let the bastards take your eye off the ball. But do remember that this week has been very, very instructive. You've had the white media who has had a Trump administration official openly admit that there are white corporations who have been deliberately hoarding medical supplies at a time like this. And the rest of the white media, you'd think they would be banging the drum about that. You would think that Rachel Maddow and the rest of the naughty boys and girls over at MSNBC, and you would think that Joy the Joke Reid, that they would be going, whoa, Peter Navarro, the president's chief trade advisor, is saying that corporations are hoarding medical supplies? Man, we got to get on this. Instead, they're acting like, oh, well, where's all the personal protection equipment at? Not sure where it's at. Maybe the president should do something. They're pretending like they didn't hear about it. It was in the New York Times, but they're pretending like they didn't hear about it. And the white media, thanks to these online search engines, they're trying to scrub it from the internet. They don't want you to know what was just said. That lets you know that this is a concerted effort going here. This is a program at work. But you know what? So is black empowerment. We got a program at work too. And it's not going to go away as soon as the white media decides that it's time for the coronavirus to fade from the headlines. Our program is going to be going on long after the coronavirus, long after Donald Trump leaves office, long after his successor leaves office. Long after, as Malcolm X beautifully put it, long after America has faded from the scene, we shall still be here. But as for today, no matter what it is that Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell or the rest of that house of thieves is trying to gin up, no matter what their agenda is, it has no bearing on our agenda. Our agenda is not trying to empower the tools of white supremacy. Our agenda is not trying to have some kumbaya circle. Our agenda is the essential selfishness of survival. Our agenda is to make sure that those who have been eating off of our ancestors' uncompensated labor and off of depriving us of our goods is to make sure that they do not get to keep what they stole. We're coming for what's ours. And there is no presidential executive order or congressionally passed Defense Production Act, or gubernatorial shelter-in-place order, or any amount of white media distractions or redactions and censorship that is going to deter us from that goal.